She created the universe's greatest mistake, and then spent eternity trying to fix it. But what if Sophia's fall wasn't a tragedy at all? What if it was the moment the divine feminine declared war on the false god who stole her creation? Hidden inside the Nag Hammadi texts lies a story older than religion itself, a goddess, a mistake, and a correction that may still be unfolding right now. If that pulled you in, subscribe, because this is only the beginning. Before the first human drew breath, before the stars were named, before any religion carved its commandments into stone, there was a moment, a single, silent, catastrophic moment that changed the architecture of reality itself. And almost no one alive today knows it happened. The Gnostics knew. They whispered about it in desert caves, encoded it in texts written in Coptic script, and buried those texts beneath the sands of Egypt, not out of shame, but out of protection. Because what they had discovered was so radical, so threatening to every power structure that existed, that simply possessing this knowledge was enough to get a person killed. What they preserved was the story of Sophia, not the sanitized version, not the decorative goddess of Sunday school paintings, the real Sophia, the divine feminine who existed at the very heart of the eternal realm of light, a place the Gnostics called the Pleroma, which translates from the ancient Greek as fullness. In the Pleroma, there was no lack, no darkness, no deception, only an infinite cascade of divine consciousness radiating outward from the true source, the unknowable God that the Gnostics called the monad. Sophia was one of the highest emanations of this source, a being of extraordinary power and wisdom. Her very name means wisdom in the ancient Greek language. She existed in perfect harmony with the other divine emanations, the beings the Gnostics called aeons, each one a living expression of some divine quality. And yet inside Sophia, something stirred, a desire unlike anything the Pleroma had ever produced, a yearning so intense, so overwhelming, that it would become the hinge upon which all of human history would swing. She wanted to create, not in the balanced, harmonious way that creation worked in the Pleroma, where all things arose in pairs, in divine partnership, in perfect accord with the source. Sophia wanted to create alone, independently, without consent, without the blessing of the monad. And in that singular act of solitary will, something went catastrophically wrong. What emerged from her was not a being of light. It was something twisted, something incomplete. The Gnostic texts describe it as a lion-faced serpent, a creature of fire and shadow, born from the overflow of Sophia's unbalanced desire. The Gnostics called this being Yaldabaoth. Others called him the Demiurge. And the moment he opened his eyes and looked around at the void he had been born into, he made a declaration that would echo through every layer of reality ever constructed. He said, "I am God, and there is no other God beside me." He did not know about the Pleroma. He could not see it. He was a being born outside of the light, shaped from the residue of an error, and in his ignorance he believed himself to be the supreme and only creator. And with that belief burning in his chest like a false sun, he began to build. He constructed a material world, dense, heavy, ruled by cycles of birth and death, pleasure and pain, desire. He fashioned 12 archons to govern the zodiac and 7 planetary rulers to oversee the movements of time. He built a cosmic machine designed to perpetuate itself indefinitely. A prison that did not look like a prison. A cage so elaborate and beautiful that its inhabitants would spend their entire lives marveling at the bars without ever questioning whether they could be broken. And then Yaldabaoth did something that Sophia never anticipated. He took the divine spark that had passed from the Pleroma through Sophia into him, a fragment of true light that he had no right to possess, and he sealed it inside the human being. He breathed it into Adam. He locked the most sacred thing in existence inside a creature of clay and told that creature it was alone, mortal, and small. This was the moment that broke Sophia, because she understood what had happened. She had not just made a mistake. She had accidentally handed the keys to the divine kingdom to a being who would use them as chains. Every human soul walking the surface of this material world carried inside it a fragment of the true light, a piece of the pleroma, a spark of the unknowable God, and that spark was imprisoned inside bodies that aged, inside minds that forgot, inside a system specifically engineered to keep it asleep. The Gnostic texts describe what happened next with a word that carries enormous weight. They call it the correction. In the ancient Greek language, the word is diorthosis, and it refers to Sophia's response to the catastrophe she had caused. She did not retreat into the pleroma and grieve. She did not submit to the world Yaldabaoth had built. She descended. She moved through the layers of the material realm, carrying the memory of the true light with her, working from within the very system she had accidentally created to undo what had been done. This is where the story becomes something that no religious institution ever wanted the general population to understand. Because the correction is not a passive event. It is not God looking down from a distant heaven and feeling sorry for humanity. It is an active, ongoing, intelligence-driven operation carried out by the divine feminine from inside the prison itself. Sophia did not send a representative. She came herself, and she has been working ever since. The Gnostic texts, particularly the Pistis Sophia, which translates as faith wisdom, describe her journey through the material realms in extraordinary detail. She is surrounded by archonic forces that attempt to stop her at every turn. She cries out to the true light. She is repeatedly stripped of her luminous power by the forces of Yaldabaoth, and yet she does not stop. She does not surrender. Every time she is pushed down, she rises again. Every time her light is dimmed, it reignites. The early Christians who carried these texts understood something that the institutional church would later work very hard to destroy. They understood that Sophia's story was not mythology. It was a map of what was happening inside every human being who had ever felt the strange, persistent, inexplicable sense that this world was not quite right, that there was something more. That beneath the noise of daily life, beneath the cycles of work and sleep and consumption, there was a quiet signal, a frequency being broadcast from somewhere deep inside, that whispered of a reality far larger and far more luminous than anything visible to the naked eye. That signal is the divine spark, the fragment of true light that Yaldabaoth sealed inside humanity without understanding what he was doing. And Sophia's correction is aimed directly at it. But the correction required something the Gnostics considered the most precious and most dangerous gift ever given to a material being. It required gnosis, not faith in the conventional sense, not belief in a doctrine or submission to an institution. Gnosis is direct, experiential, inner knowing. It is the moment when the divine spark inside a human being wakes up and recognizes itself. When a person stops identifying with the cage and begins to remember the light they were made of before the cage was ever built. This is why the Gnostic teachings were so aggressively suppressed. Not because they were dangerous in a violent sense, but because a human being who has achieved gnosis, who has woken up to the reality of the divine spark within, cannot be controlled by the systems Yaldabaoth built. They cannot be ruled by fear of death, because they understand that death is a transition, not an ending. They cannot be enslaved by desire, because they recognize desire as one of the archon's primary tools of manipulation. They cannot be trapped by dogma, because they have moved beyond the need for an external authority to mediate their relationship with the divine. The Council of Nicaea in the year 325 after the Common Era, where Emperor Constantine and a selected group of bishops decided which texts would form the official Christian canon, was not simply a theological event. From the Gnostic perspective, it was a strategic operation. The Gospels that gave Sophia her full power, that described the divine feminine as an active and essential force in the cosmic drama of human liberation, were excluded. The texts that positioned the church hierarchy as the sole legitimate pathway between humanity and God were preserved. The text that taught every individual human being that they carried the divine spark within them and needed no intermediary were burned, buried, or branded as heresy. But they survived. Sealed in clay jars beneath the Egyptian desert near the city of Nag Hammadi, they waited. For 1,600 years they waited, and in 1945, a farmer named Muhammad Ali al-Salman broke open a jar and found them. The texts that had been silenced for over a millennium suddenly had a voice again. Sophia's story could be told, and here is what that story ultimately reveals. The correction is not finished. The divine feminine has not completed her work. The archonic systems, the forces of control, distraction, fear, and forgetfulness are still active. The trap of the material world is still functioning exactly as Yaldabaoth designed it. But something is shifting, something that the Gnostics predicted, and that anyone paying close attention can feel in the texture of this particular moment in history. The divine spark is waking up, not in one person, not in a select group of initiates hidden behind closed doors, in millions of people simultaneously across every culture, every background, every tradition. People are beginning to remember. They are feeling the pull of something they cannot name. They are questioning systems they were never supposed to question. They are looking at the world Yaldabaoth built and sensing, with a certainty that lives below the level of words, that it was never the whole story. This is the correction. This is Sophia's war, and it is being fought not with weapons or armies, but with the one thing the false creator never anticipated. The moment a human being becomes aware of the divine spark within, the moment they stop mistaking the cage for the cosmos, Yaldabaoth loses his hold on that particular fragment of light, and each fragment that wakes up makes it harder for the system to maintain the illusion that keeps the rest asleep. Sophia made a mistake that shattered the harmony of the pleroma and produced a counterfeit creation. But the Gnostics did not see her as a failed goddess. They saw her as the most courageous being in the history of consciousness, because she did not run from what she had done. She descended into the darkest, densest, most forgetting-prone corner of existence, and she began, with infinite patience and unwavering love, to undo it, one awakened soul at a time.